Hey everyone, Kelsey here and welcome back to Gal. Today we are going to be doing some Instagram cinematic photo shoots inspired by Brandon Woelfel's Instagram and his photography. It's really amazing photography. And right now we're outside, we're gonna do a night shoot with lots of little lights around. Dominica here has kindly become our model. She's holding a little moonlight. And essentially I'm going to tell you about the different camera specs that I'm shooting with, how you can shoot your own night shots, and then we'll go into Photoshop, show you how to edit it similarly to Brandon, as well as use a new tool that I started using called Optics, which is a plugin for Photoshop. And what's really cool about Optics is that it was made by Boris FX, who sponsored today's video. Thank you so much to Boris FX. And essentially it takes all of the cool film and video VFX, such as sapphire that you might be used to seeing in Hollywood films, and apply them to photos. So let's go ahead and get into the photo shoot. For this shoot, I'm shooting with the Canon EOS R, which is a great full frame mirrorless camera that I use for both photography and for filming as well. And I have the 35mm lens, which is great for portraits because it gives you a little bit wider angle. And what's really cool is this lens goes down to 1.8 aperture, so you can get a lot of bokeh in the background. And because it's night, we do have a bit higher of an ISO because we need to let in more light on the sensor. And I'll show you ways to remove some of the grain that you get from having a higher ISO when you're shooting at night. It's generally better to underexpose your shots because we can always bring in more light afterwards in post. Take your hands and kind of make it more like, and bring them tutaj, tak, And now it's more like, oh, magic. So we had Dominica step forward towards us a bit more, about 2 meters or so, because we weren't really getting a lot of bokeh. So the farther she is away from the lights, and when I'm closer up to her doing a portrait, the more blur on the lights there is when we're using a lower aperture at 1.8. So these shots are looking so much better now that she's stepped farther away from the tree. Let's lift up the moon just a little bit before, Oh yeah, this looks so cool. So after this shoot, we're gonna go tomorrow to Old Town and get some day shots as well, using the exact same camera and a little bit different specs. We're gonna have a much lower ISO because it'll be daylight. And then we'll go into Photoshop. Right now, we're just experimenting with different portrait shots against a nice brick, and I'm shooting at a 1.8, 1/1600 shutter speed and 200 ISO. All right, so another thing that you should do when you're shooting these types of portrait photos is shoot raw, because you'll have more data to work with and have more preservation in the highlights and in the shadows. And look over here. So right now we're gonna take a break to go get a zapiekanka, which is like a very well-known Polish dish. So let's go enjoy the little break. Chcesz zapiekanka?
Chcę zapiekankę.
Dobrze. Smacznego jeszcze raz.
Dziękuję.
Feels like a little bit like a normal life, a little bit, huh?
Yeah, finally.
Normalna sytuacja. Sytuacja?
Sytuacja. Aha. A powiedz szczep, że się nie chrząszcz.
Nie, dziękuję. So what we're gonna do now is have Dominica hold this RGB light with a diffusion, and we're gonna play around with the light just to make it a little bit more dynamic. So we have the leaves happening, which add some shadows and interactions, but we don't have any sunlight right now, so we have to be creative with the light. Oh, and I just saw this door. That looks awesome. Let's definitely do a photo there after this, for sure. To jest dobrze. Oh, yes. So right now we just had her step forward in front of this door to get a nice portrait shot with some depth of field with the nice, beautiful vines and the door behind her. Just step forward just a tad bit more here, and then Yeah. Oh, now we're starting to get a little bit of the nighttime lights. It's really cool. So there were so many great photos that we took in these 2 sessions, and it was difficult for me to decide which ones to actually edit in this tutorial and feature. But we're going to do one nighttime scene holding the moon and show you how to add some cool effects on top of that, as well as the other one from Old Town where she has the vines around her with the RGB light. So let's get started with the nighttime scene. We're going to jump into Photoshop Camera Raw first, then into Optics. Let's get into it. What you're going to do is first take this RAW file and open it up in Photoshop. When you open up a RAW file, it'll automatically open up the Camera Raw application. And Camera Raw will give you a bunch of really useful develop tools for your photo. For example, here under Basic, we can change this to Auto if we want to. It just made a slight color change, not really a huge difference, but you can always update the white balance because we shot in RAW. Another thing we can do is increase the exposure, and you can see how it's manipulating that. And one thing that Brandon does in his photos is he reduces the highlights and he increases the shadows to bring in more detail. So you can already see before it was much darker, and as we push this up, we can start to see more detail. So play around with this until it reaches the point that you like. You can also add in some clarity here. You can boost this up to make it a little bit brighter, add some texture if you want, but not too much. Just a subtle amount. And as I mentioned in the shoot, if you have some grain in your photo because you shot at night, you can use the detail panel here to increase the slider to reduce the noise reduction. Now, if I zoom in, you can see the difference here. So noise reduction, if you increase it too much, it starts to soften the skin. And so it kind of looks a little bit fake. So you want to be careful with this and not add too much. So just a subtle amount. Just enough to get rid of that noise. And then we can zoom back out here just to see how it looks, and it's looking just fine. All right, let's close detail. And the next step is using the color mixer. So this is Brandon's trademark, is playing with these colors, and he goes into detail with this on his full Skillshare course, but I'm just going to briefly go over it. So HSL is the hue, saturation, and luminance of these different colors. So the hue is changing the color of these existing colors. So you can move the red around. You can see as we push it to the right, it makes the lips a little bit orange, but if we move it to the left, it makes her lips a little bit more pink. The oranges, if we move it to the left, it starts to make the oranges a little bit more pink toned. So if we're going more for that orange and tealish look, we may want to play around with this. But if we move it this way, it gets green. We don't want that. So just subtle adjustments. Yellows as well. If we push it to the right, it gets more green. If we push it to the left, it starts to get a little bit more warmer, which is what we want. Greens as well. If you look at this reflection of the moon in her glasses, that is green. So if we push this to the right, you can start to see some subtle changes. So if we go this way, to the left, it's more kind of a lighter green, and we go to the right, it gets more blue, which is what we want. The aquas, there's not a lot of aqua in this scene, but you can play around with the slider. I'm going to push it to the right to make it a little bit more blue in that reflection. And the blues here, this is where we're going to see a huge difference. If we move this to the left, you can start to see the trees get that sort of tealer look, which is what I did in this photo edit. All right. So again, play around with these. You don't have to do as much or too much. You don't want it to be interfering too much with her skin tones, but just plain enough to get more of a dramatic look. So here we can see the before and the after. So you can already see a huge difference in the amount of detail that we can see just using these controls here. There's also a vignette we can add under effects. If you move the vignette to the right, it's going to add a white one, which we don't want. You want to move it to the left, just to add a little bit more of a cinematic look. So you can always come back to Camera Raw to further refine these adjustments that you've made. And in order to do that, instead of just hitting open or done, you're going to click on this little caret here and open as object. And what this will do is it'll open up the image in Photoshop as a smart object. So you can see that it has the little smart object icon. If you double click on this, and it will open up Camera Raw and you can make some more detailed adjustments. So now the fun part, this is going to be adding effects, bringing more detail into the moon and adding some light leaks and some rainbows and chromatic aberrations, all using one tool, Optics by Boris FX. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, you can download the trial in my description box below and get 25% off a lifetime or a subscription of Optics. So to apply it, go up to Filter, go to Boris FX, Optics. And you can see what it did was it actually applied all of the layers that we had previously put on this photo. Now I'm going to show you how to make this from scratch, but just so you know, the way that Optics works is through layers and effects. So you can see there's different layers for each effect here, and you can turn them off by simply clicking on this lightning bolt. So you can see the chromatic aberration in the background goes away when we do that. The rainbow will go away when we turn this off. So all of these layers are independent, and you can also add different masking to each layer so that way the lighting doesn't affect all of the image, which is really cool. Now to reset this, simply click on the recycle icon here to reset this to the original. So this is the original. And down at the bottom is all of the amazing filters and effects that are built into Optics. And you can see that some of them have this S in front of it, and that stands for Sapphire, which is the Sapphire plugin that you can use for video effects. And they now put it in Optics so you can apply them to make more cinematic looks on your photos. So over here on the right is where you will see presets and parameters for each effect. So for example, right now we're on the current layer. If you select any of these, for example, the glow, you will see that it applies it to this layer, and you can play around with different presets here. And you can always go into parameters and make adjustments. But we're not going to apply a glow. Instead, we're actually going to apply a chromatic aberration first. So if you can't find it, you can actually click on the search icon and search chromatic, and it will come up here, and you can double click to apply it. And you will see that nothing actually happened. It just took away the glow effect that we had just applied. So you can see that nothing is happening here. That's because we need to make some adjustments here. So you can play around with the distortion, and you can see what's happening in the background as we add some distortion, some curvatures, and, just play around with this until it looks okay. We just want it to be a subtle amount, right? We don't want it to be too much. And what I did was I created a preset by selecting this icon up here that looks like a little page as the preset. And you'll see my preset here. And I just click to apply that. And you'll notice in my preset, it created some aberrations here on the trees and in the right corner, which I don't want. So to get rid of that, I'm going to actually create a mask on this layer. So click on this mask icon, and we're going to use the path mask. I will also show you how to use an easy mask later on, but let's do the path, and let's just click around her here to all the areas that we don't want affected by this layer. And then we need to select invert, so that way it's only affecting the bokeh up here, not down here. And let's add a blur so the mask is less noticeable just by moving this slider. And you can see the blur that's happening here. You can actually show the mask, which makes it easier. So now that we have the chromatic aberration, now let's add a rainbow, a little subtle rainbow just above the moon. I'm going to press this icon here to add a new layer. And then from light, we're going to go down to rainbow. And this will create kind of, a stereotypical rainbow, but of course we need to play around with the different parameters here so we can adjust the amount as much as we want, how subtle we want it to be. We can adjust the displacement however much we want, the blur, the radius, how big we want it to be, the aspect, the thickness, the offset, and the angle. So you can see a little bit of the rainbow happening here. And what I did was I actually made a preset after I made these adjustments. I went up here to the page to create a preset, and then it saved it to the preset. So if I click on this, it'll make just a minor adjustment and you can see the rainbow here. So now the next thing I did was I added a really cool look. So again, create a new layer, and underneath Film Lab, we're going to go into looks, and you can see there's so many different looks that you can choose from to play around with. The color reversal is really nice for this look. Burnt Cooper. There's so many different things that you can choose from. In this case, I ended up choosing a transparency one, and you can see I made a preset here, but it's the exact same. And now let's add some more detail to the moon. So let's go up to the plus icon again, and this is where we're going to go to render. And to add more detail into the moon, we're going to select the S Luna, and this will generate an actual moon. And I chose the full moon instead. And then from parameters, you can adjust the size, and you can reposition it just by clicking on this little icon here, this yellow icon. You can also adjust the outer ring to adjust the size until you get it into place to cover the moon here. And you can make some adjustments to the moon. You can adjust the rotation if you like, where you want it to be. There's lots of different things that you can choose. The brightness of it, how bright you want the moon. The color. Do you want it to have a little pinkish yellow tint? Give it that tint if you like. You can choose any color you want. And the glow intensity, how much glow you want. So there's really so much that you can do. I created a preset for the moon that I created. So if I select that. So after you apply the preset here, you can go up to the S Luna and turn off the effect just to see what it looks like. So now we need to create a mask, because when we turn this off, you can see her hands need to be wrapping the moon. So let's turn this back on, and let's reduce the opacity so we can see the hands beneath it. And this is where we can create an easy mask. So we can go ahead and zoom in here, and to create an easy mask, we're going to go click on this icon here to create a mask, easy mask. And then we're going to use this icon, which is paint foreground, to paint this. Now click on the zoom to get rid of that. And now we can paint, and you can make adjustments to the size of this brush as well, just by increasing this slightly or using the slider to increase it, just like that. Around, just by going around here. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because basically you're telling the mask where the foreground is. And then you can use the paint bucket tool, and you can fill this in. And then you can use the paint background to fill in the background. And then what we can do is click on generate mask, and it generates a mask around this area. And we can blur the edges a bit, slightly, and then we can click on 100% opacity, and then click on the photo to bring it back. Now you can see the hands are back, even with the opacity at 100%. So it's also not affecting the image anymore. So if we fit this to view, we can now see the natural color is back. So this is why the easy mask is super cool. It works super fast. And another thing you can do is play around with the blend modes. If you want this to look a little bit more natural, you can go and play around with some of the different blend modes like overlay. And this will just blend it in with the original a little bit more, and it just looks a little bit more natural. But you can certainly keep it at the normal. It just depends on what you're going for. So I'll go ahead and I will put it at overlay, and we'll go from here. The next thing I did was I added some light leaks on top. So I clicked on add new layer, and the first thing I did was go to light, and I went to S Sapphire Light Leak. And it adds a really nice default soft light over top. But in this case, I'm going to add a color splash on the left. And here you can really have a lot of fun with it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be realistic. It really depends on what you're going for. So for this one, for example, in a lot of Brandon's photos, he'll put a really heavy light leak on the side or even on top of the subject. So if you wanted to move this light leak, you can just shift it over using the Shift X and Y. And if you want to bring it down, move the Shift Y down, and you can kind of add it on top of the subject just slightly. And then you can change the color if you like. Change this to more of a kind of orangish color, orangish red to match the scene. And now it looks like it's a little bit more a part of the scene. But again, it's not super realistic, but it could be more of a magical scene that you're going for. In my case, I just want to shift it over to the left to just have a subtle amount on the left. And you can certainly play around with the opacity as well as the glow brightness. It will also affect other parts of the image. So if you don't want the glow affecting the moon at all, you can just reduce that if you want. All right, I also added another light leak in the top right corner. So I'm going to add a new layer here and also select light leak. And this time I use the single spot, which just adds a little white single spot. In this case, I'm going to change the color to kind of a reddish tone. You may have to shift the hue to match the other one, so it's like more orangey color. You can probably shift that over just slightly, and that's looking like it's matching this a little bit better. And I'm going to shift the Y so it's more up in the corner and shift it over with the Shift X just so it's more subtle. And you can also reduce the glow brightness so it doesn't affect the moon that much. All right, so now that we have everything here, what we can do is look at the before and after. To do that, you can see right now that this top layer is turned on, which means that we can view it. At the bottom, you can see the original too, so you can click on that to create the before and after. You can also just go up here and select this, and you can slide this to see the before and after here. So it really added a lot here. It really made this image pop. And if you want to apply this to other images, remember you can always go up to File, Save Setup, and then you can always go to File and open that setup on any image that you're working with. And now to save it, just click on this gear icon, and you can always go back and turn this off to see the before, and then you can see the after. And now let's go ahead and go into the daytime photo edit. All right, so here we have the daytime image. I already have it opened up in Camera Raw, and you can see I've already made a bunch of different adjustments, just like we did before, to the basic controls, and same with the color mixer as well. I played around with the different HSL tools to the saturation and the luminance as well, and you can see the before and the after. So you can see I changed the green tones to make it more of a teal color, and you can also see that the yellows here, I made them more of kind of a warmer reddish color. All right, and I already opened it up as a smart object just like we did before. And the next thing we need to do is apply optics as well, just to make it pop. So I'm going to go back up to Filter, Boris Effects, Optics. And what this will do is it'll apply all of the effects that I already put on this image. So this is going to be the final result, but I want to show you how I did this from scratch. So I'm just going to click the reset button here. And for the first effect, we're going to go to Film Lab and go to Film Stocks. And underneath Film Stocks, there's so many, like literally you can click and try out all these different film stocks, anything that you want here, anything that you can imagine. But I chose the Kodachrome. I love Kodachrome, and I love the song Kodachrome as well. Kodachrome 200 I chose. So this one down here, I applied this, and now you can click the lightning bolt for the before and after. You can see it just gives it a little bit more contrast, more of a filmic look. And the next thing I did was brighten up the image by using a cool lighting effect. So first I'm going to select add new layer, and then underneath light, I chose reflector. And I chose silver reflector 5. You can also try different golden reflectors if you want to add more gold tones. You can play around with this. But I chose the silver reflector 5. Then the next thing I added was another layer, and I applied a light leak from the light tab. So click on light leak. And this also looks really nice with the light leak around the edges, which is something that you could definitely choose. I chose to do the color splash left, and underneath parameters, I chose actually kind of like a magenta reddish color to match the shirt. So you can also take the dropper tool and select a red color from the scene, and then play around with that and hit OK. And you can see that it's still kind of like a tomato red color, and you can shift the hue instead to make it just slightly different. Maybe this looks pretty good. And you can also adjust the opacity so it's not as bright. And to play around with the location, you'll see that there's also another part of this light leak that's down here as part of the preset. So you can bring that in if you like, or just shift it off to make it more subtle. Completely up to you what you want. You can also go down to the glow and open this up to adjust the glow brightness, which affects the other lights in the scene. So just use your discretion here, however much you want. You can play around with that overall glow that it gives. So that is the effects that I added to this daytime portrait. You can see the before and after here. This on the right is with just the raw color adjustments, and on the left is the optics adjustment. So it just has more of a pop, and it just took a couple of minutes and it's looking great. Then just click on the gear icon to save it and apply it as a smart filter to the Photoshop image. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this Photoshop and optics photo editing tutorial, and you go out and you take your own photography now and you can start applying some of these basic effects to your own photos. And a huge shout out to Brandon for inspiring this video. I really think your work is great, and I hope that you also watched this video and enjoyed it. And don't forget to try out optics. Remember, you can get the lifetime license. It's a really great deal, and get 25% off with my code below. You can also check out other Boris Effects tutorials that I have by just clicking up here. I have a whole playlist of other Boris Effects video effects that I've done. All right, you guys, keep creating better photos, videos, and audio in all media with Gal. Bye. Oh, and one more thing. Give this video a thumbs up. That's all. Bye.